At 4:03 a.m., I opened our bedroom door. A stranger was sleeping in my spot. She smiled and said, "Don't overreact." I don't think any man forgets the exact time he realizes his life just took a nosedive. For me, it was 4:03 in the morning. I had been working a late shift, came home exhausted, and was ready to collapse into my bed. Instead, when I pushed open the bedroom door, there was already someone there. A stranger, sleeping in my spot, not sprawled out in confusion, not panicking like he was caught in the wrong place. He was relaxed, half under my blanket, his shoes kicked off neatly by the dresser like he lived here. And next to him, sitting up against the pillows, was my wife, Lauren. She wasn't crying, wasn't covering herself, wasn't fumbling for words. She actually had the audacity to smile at me. Her first words? "Don't overreact." Overreact. She said that while some man I'd never seen before was using my pillow. The shock only lasted a second before the anger surged in. I stormed across the room, yanked the blanket away from him, and dragged him halfway out of the bed by his wrist before he even knew what was happening. He was bigger than me, but I had surprise and fury on my side. Lauren jumped up and grabbed my arm, screaming at me to stop, but the more she shouted, the clearer it became. She wasn't scared for herself. She was scared for him. That stung deeper than anything. The guy stammered something about misunderstanding, about talking things through, but I shoved him toward the wall. My voice came out louder than I expected, shaking the whole room. I demanded his name, demanded why he was here. Lauren kept saying it wasn't what I thought, but the man, finally giving up the act, said his name was Travis. And then he had the nerve to add that Lauren had told him I wouldn't be back until morning. That was when I realized this wasn't a one-time slip-up. This wasn't bad judgment after too much wine. This was routine. They had planned this. I shoved him again, harder this time, and Lauren actually stood between us with her arms out like I was the intruder. "Don't make this worse," she hissed at me. Like I was the problem. My own house, my own bed, and she was protecting him. The betrayal hit harder than the adrenaline. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time I saw a stranger too. I told Travis to get out, and when he didn't move fast enough, I grabbed his jacket off the chair and threw it in his face. He cursed at me under his breath, but stumbled toward the door. On the way out, he muttered something I'll never forget. "She promised you'd understand." Understand what? That my wife had been using our marriage like a hotel where she could check in her new guests? I locked the door after him, and when I turned around, Lauren wasn't apologizing, wasn't begging. She was furious at me. She accused me of being violent, of scaring him, of embarrassing her. The way she said it, you'd think I had been caught sneaking in with someone else. I couldn't stand the sight of her pacing around the room, spewing excuses that made no sense. I started ripping open drawers, looking for any proof that what I was seeing wasn't just the tip of the iceberg. That's when I found it, a second phone. It was shoved into the bottom of her nightstand, under some books. Sleek, newer than the one she normally used, and locked with a code I didn't know. I held it up, and her face drained of color. That told me more than any explanation could. I said nothing, just slid the phone into my pocket. Her reaction told me it mattered. She tried to snatch it back, lunging toward me, but I pushed past her and left the bedroom. I needed space to think, but I wasn't about to leave the house and let her cover her tracks. So I sat in the kitchen, the phone heavy in my hand, while she stomped around upstairs like a teenager whose secret stash just got confiscated. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. The clock ticked from 4:30 to 6 o'clock, then to 7 o'clock. Every sound in the house felt amplified. The creak of the stairs, the hum of the refrigerator, the quiet thud as Lauren closed the bedroom door. Around 7:15, someone rang the doorbell. I checked the peephole. Travis. He actually had the audacity to come back. I didn't open the door, but I watched him pace on the porch, muttering into his phone. He stayed out there for 15 minutes before finally leaving. And in that time, my neighbors across the street definitely saw him. Perfect. Now gossip would spread, and fast. When Lauren finally came downstairs, she acted like nothing happened. She poured herself coffee, scrolling on her main phone, pretending she didn't notice the other one was missing. I waited until she sat down before telling her flatly, "You're not going to work today. We're talking about this." She rolled her eyes. Then she muttered something about me being dramatic. But she sat down anyway, arms crossed. I didn't let her speak first. I laid it all out. How long had she been doing this? How did she know this man? Why was he comfortable enough to sleep in my bed? At first, she gave vague answers. "We're just friends. He needed a place to crash." "It's not what you think." But when I pressed harder, she snapped. Said Travis was someone she met at work. Said he was struggling financially, and she'd been helping him out. Helping him out with what? Money? A bed? My wife wasn't just cheating. She was investing in her affair. That's when it clicked. Over the last 6 months, I had noticed weird withdrawals from our joint account. Small enough not to trigger alarms, but steady. I had chalked it up to her shopping habits. Now I knew better. She finally broke and admitted she had been supporting Travis because he was going through a rough patch. The way she said it, she sounded like some selfless saint, not a woman caught funneling marital money into another man's pocket. The argument escalated until I slammed my fist against the table. She flinched, not because she thought I'd hit her, but because for the first time she realized she wasn't controlling the conversation. I told her I was keeping the second phone. That's when she dropped her mug, shattering it across the floor, and screamed that I had no right to go through her personal things. The performance was loud enough for the neighbors to hear through the open window. Good. Let them hear. I picked up the phone, stood, and walked toward the door. She chased after me, clawing at my arm, but I shrugged her off. I wasn't leaving for work, and I wasn't leaving to cool down. I was heading straight to my friend Nate's place down the street. He'd been my closest friend since college, the kind of guy who always had a spare couch. When I got there, still gripping the locked phone, Nate opened the door and froze. He didn't need to ask. He had seen Travis on the porch earlier. Word spread fast in our neighborhood. Over breakfast, I told him everything. He didn't say much, just listened, nodding grimly. Then he said something that chilled me. Mark, I've seen Travis around before. Not just with Lauren. With Courtney, too. Courtney, Lauren's best friend. The one who always played mediator when we argued. Always insisted Lauren needed more freedom. Suddenly it all made sense. Courtney wasn't just covering for Lauren. She was helping orchestrate the whole thing. The anger came back stronger than before, mixing with something colder, resolve. I wasn't just dealing with one betrayal. I was dealing with an entire web. And I wasn't going to sit quietly while they played me for a fool. I held up the phone and said, then it's time to find out what's inside this. And that was the moment I decided. No more shock, no more confusion. From here on out, I was going to tear their little world apart, piece by piece. I didn't waste any time once I had that phone. Nate lent me a set of tools he used for his IT work. Small screwdrivers, data cables, things he probably shouldn't have had outside of his job, and by noon, we had the phone connected to his laptop. Lauren had locked it with a 6-digit code, but Nate had a program that could brute force it given enough time. While it worked, he handed me a beer and told me to brace myself. He was right. By late afternoon, the phone unlocked, and the screen lit up with a wallpaper I'd never seen before. Travis with his arm around Lauren, grinning like they were high school sweethearts. My throat went dry. This wasn't some temporary fling. It looked like a full-blown relationship. The messages only confirmed it. There were texts about money transfers, about nights she'd stay over at our place. Even jokes about me being clueless. Each thread I opened was like another stab to the ribs. She wasn't sneaking around out of guilt. She was mocking me while she did it. But the part that really lit the fire in me wasn't the cheating, it was the money. Transfer after transfer from our joint account. Small enough to blend in with daily expenses, but they added up to thousands. All of it funneled into Travis's failing construction startup. I remembered Lauren talking months ago about how our savings felt tight and suggesting I cut back on overtime so we could reconnect. Meanwhile, she was bleeding me dry for another man's pipe dream. I wanted to storm back into the house and throw the phone in her face, but Nate stopped me. He reminded me that if I went nuclear too early, she'd find a way to twist it back on me. And he was right. Lauren had always been good at flipping the narrative. So I forced myself to sit on it, to plan. That night, I returned home. Lauren acted like everything was fine, even cooked dinner, humming to herself like we hadn't had the worst fight of our marriage hours before. I played along, said little, and when she asked where I'd been, I told her I needed air. She narrowed her eyes, but didn't push. Over the next few days, I started gathering proof. Screenshots of transfers, copies of messages, even emails she had forwarded to herself from her work account. It was almost too easy. Lauren had gotten cocky. The more I dug, the uglier it got. Travis wasn't just some down-on-his-luck guy. He was a manipulator with a trail of failed partnerships and burned bridges. He owed money to half the county, and Lauren wasn't his first sponsor. He had a habit of cozying up to women with stable husbands and draining them dry. The kicker? Courtney was in on it. There were whole threads of Lauren and Courtney gossiping like teenagers, laughing about cover stories and coordinating nights. Courtney even bragged about distracting me once by dragging me into an endless conversation while Travis slipped out the back. Every message I read pushed me further from shock and closer to something else, revenge. But I knew I couldn't just lash out. Lauren was too good at spinning. If I accused her, she'd cry to her parents, claim I was paranoid, and suddenly I'd be the villain. I needed her cornered, with no way out. Things came to a head faster than I expected. 3 days later, Travis showed up at my workplace. I work in logistics, and it's not exactly glamorous, but it's respectable. I was finishing paperwork in the office when I heard commotion in the lobby. By the time I stepped out, Travis was there, leaning against the front desk with a smug grin. "Mark," he drawled, loud enough for half the staff to hear. "Heard you've been snooping around." My stomach twisted. He was trying to humiliate me on my own turf. My boss peeked out of her office, and my co-workers exchanged glances. I told Travis to leave, but he stepped closer, lowering his voice just enough for me to hear. "Careful, man. She'll pick me if you push too hard." I wanted to break his jaw, but I clenched my fists and walked away. That was exactly what he wanted, a scene. Instead, I called security and had him escorted out. But the damage was done. My co-workers didn't need details. The gossip engine would spin this into something ugly. That night, I confronted Lauren. Not directly about the affair, but about Travis showing up at my job. She barely flinched. "He probably just wanted to talk," she said, like it was nothing. Like a grown man barging into my workplace wasn't a declaration of war. That's when I realized something. Lauren wasn't worried about being caught. She thought she had me locked down. The house was in both our names, the finances tangled, the families intertwined. In her head, I wasn't going anywhere. She could play this game indefinitely. I needed to flip the script. The next weekend, I told her we should host a small dinner. Just close family and Courtney, of course. She seemed surprised, but she agreed. Probably thought I was trying to smooth things over. Perfect. In the meantime, I kept digging. Nate helped me trace the money further, and sure enough, Lauren had been transferring not just from our joint account, but from a savings account I hadn't touched in months. That one cut deep, it had been meant for a future home upgrade. By the time Saturday rolled around, I had a folder full of evidence and a plan forming in my head. Dinner started normal enough. Lauren played hostess, smiling and pouring wine, while her parents made small talk about the economy. Courtney arrived late, flustered, with some excuse about traffic. She hugged Lauren a little too tightly, whispering something in her ear that made them both smirk. I sat back, watching, waiting. Then, halfway through dinner, my brother Dean showed up. I hadn't invited him. Lauren had. My jaw clenched as he walked in like he owned the place, patting me on the shoulder with that fake smile he always wore. Dean and I had never gotten along. He was slick, always chasing money, always finding shortcuts. And as the evening went on, I noticed the way Lauren leaned toward him, the way he seemed oddly comfortable in my house. Something about it didn't sit right. After dessert, when everyone was relaxed, I excused myself to grab something from the office. I returned with the folder, slid it onto the table. The chatter died instantly. "I think we need to talk about where our money's been going," I said. Lauren froze. Courtney went pale. Dean shifted uncomfortably. I opened the folder and laid out printouts, bank transfers, screenshots, even a photo of Travis with Lauren at a hotel 2 towns over. Gasps rippled around the table. Lauren stammered, trying to dismiss it as old or out of context, but the volume of evidence made it impossible to wave away. Her parents looked horrified. Courtney tried to step in, saying I was exaggerating, but I had her texts printed too. She fell silent, cheeks burning. That's when Dean spoke up, his voice calm but cutting. "Mark, you're blowing this out of proportion. You don't want to ruin your marriage over a misunderstanding." A misunderstanding. The way he said it made my blood run cold. Because it didn't sound like someone defending a sister-in-law. It sounded like someone with skin in the game. I locked eyes with him and saw it, the flicker of guilt. Suddenly, everything clicked. Dean wasn't just covering for Lauren. He was in on it. The moment Dean spoke up, I felt the air in the room change. It wasn't just his words. It was the way Lauren sat back, suddenly less panicked, like she knew she had an ally at the table. My own brother, siding with her. I leaned forward and asked him directly, "How much did she pay you to cover for her?" The question hung heavy. My mother-in-law gasped. Courtney tried to laugh, but it came out choked. Dean glared at me, lips tightening. That silence told me everything. Lauren broke it first, her voice sharp. "Don't drag your brother into this, Mark. He's only trying to help." That was it. She had just admitted, without realizing it, that Dean was involved. I opened another envelope and slid out a paper. Bank records from an old account I hadn't touched in years. I had printed them the night before. On the list of withdrawals, one stood out. $2,000, transferred to a consulting fee. The account holder? Dean Whitman. My brother's face drained. He stammered something about it being a loan, that Lauren had asked him for advice on managing funds. But the damage was already done. My father-in-law turned to him, red-faced, demanding an explanation. Dean kept fumbling, and Lauren jumped in, trying to redirect the conversation back to me. That was when the doorbell rang. The sound froze everyone. I knew before I even got up who it would be. And I was right. Standing on the porch, swaying slightly from either booze or lack of sleep, was Travis. "Evening, folks," he slurred as I tried to block the doorway. I heard there was a party. He shoved past me before I could stop him. My in-laws gasped. Courtney covered her mouth, and Lauren leapt up from the table like her savior had just arrived. "Travis, what are you doing here?" she hissed. But he wasn't here to hide. He was here to talk. Loudly. "Why not?" he barked, pointing at me. "He already knows everything. Hell, the whole neighborhood probably does by now." He staggered toward the table, waving his arms. "You should have told them, Lauren. Should have told them about the investments, about how much you believed in me." The room erupted. My mother-in-law demanded answers. My father-in-law slammed his fist against the table. Courtney tried to slip toward the door, but I caught her wrist and told her to sit down. Dean buried his face in his hands, muttering curses. Travis, oblivious, kept talking. "She's the only one who ever had faith in me. She said she'd leave him once things settled. She said." Lauren shrieked for him to shut up, but it was too late. The words were out. Her parents turned to her, horrified. "You said what?" her mother snapped. I stood there, letting the chaos burn. This was better than anything I could have orchestrated. But I wasn't finished. I pulled out my phone and projected a series of photos onto the TV screen using the wireless link. Hotel receipts, selfies Travis had taken with Lauren, even a screenshot of a message where she had told Courtney, "I'll finally be free once Mark calms down and signs the refinance." Every face in that room shifted. My father-in-law's fury turned to disgust. My mother-in-law broke down in tears. Courtney sat stiff, staring at her lap. Dean tried to stand up and leave, but I blocked his path. "You're not walking out until they hear how deep you're in this," I said. And that was when another bomb dropped. Courtney, desperate to save herself, turned on Lauren. "Don't look at me like that," she spat. "You dragged me into this. You said Travis was just a distraction. You said you'd never actually leave Mark." The table went silent. Lauren froze, then tried to backtrack, but Courtney kept going. She confessed that she had covered for Lauren dozens of times, making excuses, keeping me busy. She confessed that Travis had crashed at her apartment too, when Lauren needed to keep him out of sight. I felt sick. This wasn't just my wife betraying me. It was an entire network of people I had once trusted, laughing behind my back. Lauren tried to scream over her, claiming Courtney was twisting things. But Travis, still drunk, sealed it. He laughed. A harsh, broken laugh. "Don't fight it, babe. It's true. You wanted both worlds. The husband with the house and the family name, and me with the excitement. You told me yourself." The room exploded again. My father-in-law stood and told Lauren she had shamed their family. My mother-in-law stormed into the kitchen, muttering about annulments. Dean tried once more to slink away, but this time my father-in-law grabbed him by the collar and demanded answers. Dean cracked. He admitted Lauren had been paying him to handle me. She had promised him a cut of Travis's business once it launched. He had been feeding her information about me, keeping her steps ahead. It was surreal, hearing my own brother admit he'd been selling me out for a quick payday. That was the moment the anger stopped burning hot and turned cold. I looked around at the wreckage of what used to be my life. My wife clinging to a drunken fraud, my brother exposed as a parasite, my in-laws shattered, and Courtney staring at the floor like she wished she could disappear. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I just told them all, "This ends now." Then I picked up the folder, gathered the evidence, and walked out. Behind me, the shouting continued. Lauren crying, her parents screaming, Travis laughing until someone told him to shut his mouth. I didn't care. The storm was theirs to weather. But I wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. Over the next week, I put my plan into motion. I contacted a lawyer, a tough one, the kind who didn't blink at messy divorces. I froze the accounts I could, cut off Lauren's access to credit cards, and started filing paperwork. I sent copies of the financial evidence to her employer, highlighting the misuse of company time in her emails with Travis. And while she scrambled, Travis imploded. His business collapsed when the last of Lauren's money dried up. Word spread fast. Investors pulled out, suppliers cut ties. The man who had strutted into my house was reduced to begging for odd jobs within a week. But the best part came when Dean's creditors, people I hadn't even known existed, started showing up. Apparently, he'd been juggling debts for years, and without Lauren's secret payments, he couldn't keep the wolves at bay. He called me, begging for help. I didn't even pick up. One night, as I sat in Nate's living room going over documents, I got a message from Lauren. Just 5 words. "Please, let's fix this." I didn't reply, because for the first time in weeks, I realized I didn't need revenge to feel whole. The collapse of their carefully built lies was revenge enough. But I also knew one thing. I wasn't done until every single person who played me paid in full. And part 4, that was where I'd make sure of it. The dinner had been the spark. After that night, the fire spread quickly, burning through every illusion Lauren had built around herself. And I wasn't about to stop it. I wanted the whole house of cards to collapse, and I wanted to be the one standing there, watching it fall. My lawyer worked faster than I imagined. Within days, Temporary orders were in place, freezing joint accounts and blocking Lauren from making large withdrawals. She screamed when she found out. She called me a coward, a thief, even tried storming into my workplace to cause a scene. Security escorted her out, and the footage of her yelling in the lobby ended up circulating among co-workers. By the next morning, her reputation was in pieces. I didn't stop there. I delivered copies of her messages with Travis, particularly the ones about transferring investment funds to her employer's HR department. She had been funneling money on company time, using her work email. Within a week, she was suspended pending investigation. Without her job, she lost the last stable income she had. Meanwhile, Travis was drowning. I learned through Nate that his business had folded completely. Vendors refused to deliver, clients pulled out, and word of his drinking problem spread fast. The man who had strutted into my house at 4:03 a.m. now spent his afternoons begging for odd jobs around town, still owing money to nearly everyone he'd met. I thought that would satisfy me. But then came Courtney. She had been engaged, something I hadn't paid much attention to before. Her fiancé, Evan, was a decent guy who had always struck me as straightforward, a bit quiet. After the dinner, I made sure he received copies of the texts she had exchanged with Lauren, all the lies she had told to cover for the affair. When he read them, he didn't scream or throw things. He simply left, moved his stuff out within 24 hours, and never looked back. Courtney tried calling me afterward, sobbing that I had ruined her life. I told her the truth. She had done that herself. And then there was Dean. My brother called me daily for 2 weeks, each message more desperate than the last. The creditors had started circling, and with no consulting fees from Lauren, he was cornered. He begged for a loan, said we were family, that we had to stick together. I ignored him at first, but when he showed up at my door, I finally answered. He looked awful, hollow-eyed, thinner, his usual slick confidence gone. "You don't understand, Mark," he said, voice cracking. I thought I was playing the game. She promised me. I cut him off. "You sold me out for scraps, Dean. You knew what she was doing, and you chose a payout over blood." He started crying. Real, pitiful tears. But I felt nothing. I shut the door in his face. That was the last time I saw him. Later, I heard he'd filed for bankruptcy after his car was repossessed and his credit cards maxed out. Karma didn't need my help with him. As for Lauren, her unraveling was spectacular. Without money, without a job, without Travis propping her up, she tried turning back to me. First with texts, then with calls, then showing up at Nate's house late one night, pounding on the door until the neighbors threatened to call the cops. Her voice cracked as she shouted, "We can fix this. We can start over." But I had already fixed things, just not in the way she wanted. Weeks earlier, before the confrontation at dinner, I had filed for divorce quietly. My lawyer had guided me through it, making sure all the paperwork was in order, leveraging the evidence I'd collected. Lauren had signed documents she didn't fully read, thinking they were financial adjustments. She had no idea she'd already agreed to terms that stripped her of claims to the house, savings, and even the car she drove. So when she tried to crawl back, I handed her a copy of the finalized decree. Her face went white as she realized she had already lost everything. "You tricked me," she whispered, her voice breaking. "No," I said calmly. "You tricked yourself. I just stopped playing along." She crumpled to the curb outside Nate's house, sobbing. I didn't watch for long. I closed the door, turned off the porch light, and left her to whatever future she could scrape together. From then on, it was quiet. Travis disappeared, likely skipping town to dodge debt collectors. Dean vanished from family gatherings, his shame too heavy to carry. Courtney became a pariah among her circle, everyone whispering about how she had covered for Lauren and lost her fiancé in the process. And Lauren? Last I heard, she was working part-time at a diner across town, barely able to afford rent. Every time I drove past that strip, I felt nothing but a cold certainty. Actions have consequences. As for me, I rebuilt. Nate offered me his spare room until the divorce finalized, and in that quiet space, I started to breathe again. I went back to hobbies I hadn't touched in years, reconnected with co-workers who had rallied behind me after Lauren's meltdown at my job, and even began taking on leadership projects. My boss respected how I had kept my composure when Travis tried to humiliate me at work, and within months, I had been promoted. The irony wasn't lost on me. While Lauren's world crumbled, mine was finally solidifying. The last loose end came months later, at a family gathering I almost skipped. My parents had begged me to attend, promising Dean wouldn't be there. But when I walked in, there he was, sitting in the corner, thinner than ever, avoiding everyone's eyes. For a moment, I considered leaving, but then I caught his gaze. He tried to smile, a weak, broken thing, but I looked away. I didn't know him forgiveness. Instead, I spent the evening with relatives who had supported me. people who had seen the truth and stayed by my side. And when I left, I realized something important. Revenge hadn't made me whole. It had simply cleared the rot from my life, burned away the people who never deserved to be there in the first place. Lauren, Travis, Courtney, Dean, they weren't weights I had to carry anymore. They were lessons. Harsh, painful lessons, but lessons all the same. That night, as I drove home, I thought about the moment it all began. 4:03 a.m., opening my bedroom door to find a stranger in my bed. Lauren had told me not to overreact. But looking at where we all ended up, I realized I hadn't overreacted at all. If anything, I had reacted just right.